He called her ordinary. He called her forgettable. After their divorce, Damien Hart threw his ex-wife Alara aside like a worn-out shoe, mocking her for being plain simple and knowing her limitations. He flaunted his new life, his new fiancée, and his ambition. But what happens when that ordinary woman, the one he thought was nothing without him, suddenly reappears at the most exclusive gathering of billionaires on Earth? What happens when the man everyone fears defers to her? This is the story of how a single sound, the thud, thud, thud of a private helicopter, can shatter a man's entire reality. The charity gala was exactly the kind of event Damien Hart now considered his natural habitat. It wasn't the Met, not yet, but the Aspen Grove Foundation Ball was a significant stepping stone. The ballroom of the St. Regis was saturated with old money and new ambition, a heady perfume of opportunity. Damien, resplendent in a custom Tom Ford tuxedo, moved through the crowd with the practiced ease of a man who believed truly that he had arrived. On his arm was Sienna, a woman who looked like she'd been genetically engineered to accessorize a life like his. She was 24 with a venture capitalist father and an Instagram following that quantified her value. "Damien, darling," she purred, tapping a manicured finger on his lapel. "Isn't that Charles Taggart over there, the one from Apex Ventures? You simply must talk to him." "All in good time, my love," Damien murmured, scanning the room. He was hunting bigger game. He was here to be seen. His divorce from Alara, finalized 6 months prior, had been an act of liberation. He had, in his own words, shed dead weight. Alara had been ordinary, so shatteringly, infuriatingly ordinary. She was the librarian, quiet, background beige wife he'd married when he was still a nobody. She'd been content with simple things. Second-hand books, long walks, quiet evenings. She had no ambition, no spark. She didn't understand his need to conquer. When he'd finally hit his first major bonus, her first instinct wasn't to celebrate it per se, but to suggest they finally fixed the boiler. He'd left her for Sienna, a decision he considered a corporate merger for his own life. And then he saw her. He froze his champagne flute halfway to his lips. What in the hell is she doing here? Sienna followed his gaze. Who, Alara? My ex-wife. She was standing near a side exit, not mingling, just observing. She wasn't dressed for a gala. She wore a simple dark blue dress that looked like it came off a rack at a department store. Not a bad one, but certainly not couture. She held a simple clutch. Her hair was pulled back. She looked, as always, utterly unremarkable. A wave of irritation mixed with a strange acidic pity rose in Damien. "This is embarrassing," he hissed, mostly to himself. "She must have snuck in. Or she's working the event. Oh, that's her?" Sienna's voice dripped with condescension. She sized Alara up in a single dismissive glance. "Oh, darling, she looks tired." "She looks desperate," Damien corrected. He straightened his tie, a plan forming. He couldn't have her here. It tainted his new image. He began to stride over Sienna, trailing in his wake a wolf closing in. "Alara," he said. His voice was loud enough to make a few nearby heads turn. Alara looked up, her gray eyes betraying no surprise. Just a quiet flatness. "Damien, this is a surprise," he said, letting a smirk play on his lips. "I didn't think this was your kind of scene. Honestly, how did you even get a ticket? Did you call in a favor with the caterer?" Sienna let out a noise like a suppressed giggle. Alara's gaze was steady. "I was invited." "Invited?" Damien laughed. "By who?" "The florist. Look, Alara, whatever this is." He gestured around the opulent room. "It isn't you. You were always more simple. It's best if you just go. You're making people uncomfortable." "Am I?" Alara asked, her voice soft. "Or am I just making you uncomfortable, Damien? Don't be ridiculous." Sienna cut in, stepping forward. "He's just trying to save you the embarrassment. You're clearly out of your depth. This is an event for doers, for people changing the world. Not for Well, whatever it is you do now. Sorting books. Ilara's eyes drifted to Sienna, then back to Damien. You told me I had no ambition, Damien. That I didn't understand the world you wanted to live in. You said I was a charming but ultimately simple chapter. I believe those were your words. And I was right, Damien said, his patience snapping. He felt the eyes of Charles Taggart on him from across the room and wanted this over. You are simple. You're ordinary. And I am not. Now please leave. You're ruining the ambiance. He took Sienna's arm, preparing to make a grand dismissive turn. He leaned in, lowering his voice to a hiss. This is my world now, Ilara. You were never built for it. Know your limitations. He turned and walked away. He heard a few people at the next table murmur. He felt a swell of pride. He had drawn the line. He'd put the past and its ordinariness firmly in its place. Ilara watched him go. She stood for a moment longer, a ghost in the glittering machine. Then she turned, slipped out the side exit, and disappeared into the aspen night. She walked 2 blocks, her simple heels clicking on the icy pavement until she reached a parked, unassuming sedan. She got in the engine, turning over with a quiet hum. The designer gowns and clinking glasses of the gala faded behind her. She drove for 10 minutes away from the lights, away from the town, toward the darkness of the mountains. She pulled into a small private airfield, one used only by charter flights and the ultra-wealthy. She parked the sedan and walked toward a small heated hangar, the code for the door punched from memory. Inside, her ordinary life ended. Hanging on a rack was a simple black flight suit. On a steel table sat an encrypted satellite phone. She picked it up. There was one text message received an hour ago. It contained only a set of coordinates and 3 words. You're needed. A.V. Ilara stripped off the simple blue dress, letting it fall to the floor. She zipped up the flight suit, her movements economical and precise. She wasn't a librarian. She hadn't been a simple wife. She had been hiding. Her marriage to Damien had been a cover, a deep psychological cover after her last job, a job that had nearly gotten her killed. She'd chosen the most ordinary man she could find in the most ordinary town to disappear into a life of beige. Damien, in his towering arrogance, had been the perfect camouflage. He never looked close enough to see the steel beneath the softness. He only saw what he wanted to see, a mirror for his own greatness. She checked the fuel gauges on the sleek, matte black Pilatus PC-12 turboprop waiting in the hangar. Her real life. She climbed into the cockpit, the familiar glow of the avionics illuminating her face. She was Ilara, yes. But to the only 4 people in the world who mattered, she was known as Cerebra, the ghost, the most sought-after and feared strategic advisor on the planet. She keyed the mic. Aspen Tower, this is November 12 Victor Alpha, ready for takeoff, IFR departure. As the plane climbed into the dark sky, Ilara looked down at the glittering jewel of the St. Regis Hotel. She thought of Damien preening in his tuxedo, mocking her. A small, cold smile touched her lips. He has no idea, she whispered to the darkness. He never did. The Aegis Global Summit was not an event you were invited to. You were summoned. It was held every 2 years, always in a location that was both breathtaking and borderline impossible to access. This year it was the Eyrie, a hyper-futuristic compound built on a private mountain peak in the most remote part of the Canadian Rockies. It was inaccessible by road. The only way in or out was by air. This was not Davos. Davos was for politicians and celebrities. Aegis was for the people who owned the politicians and celebrities. It was a gathering of the 0.001%, the reclusive titans who moved global markets with a single phone call. And this year, the summit was a war room. Alistair Vale, the AV, from the text message, was in trouble. Vale was a legend. A trillion-dollar man who had built Vale Holdings from nothing into a global empire spanning green tech, aerospace, and data analytics. He was also Ilara's first and most important client. He had found her when she was a 22-year-old prodigy at MIT writing a thesis on predictive economic modeling that was so advanced the U.S. Treasury had tried to classify it. He had funded her, protected her, and unleashed her, and in return, she had made him indestructible. Until now. The threat had a name, Cyrus Thorne. Thorne was new money but brutal. He was a corporate raider who didn't just buy companies, he dismembered them. He saw Vail Holdings not as a legacy, but as a carcass to be stripped. He had spent the last year launching a catastrophic high-speed hostile takeover using algorithmic trading, media manipulation, and political sabotage. And according to Alistair's last frantic message, Thorne was winning. Elara's Pilatus cut through the sub-zero air. She wasn't heading to the summit. Not yet. She landed at a private airstrip 100 miles south of the Eyrie. A black armored Mercedes Maybach was waiting on the tarmac, its engine running. Her ordinary life was a distant, comical memory. The blue dress, the Gala Damian's smug, punchable face. It was the life of a character she had played. Now she was back in her own skin. She spent the 90-minute drive in the back of the Maybach, which was a mobile command center. Screens flickered, showing her the real-time data flow of Vail's company. She absorbed it all: stock fluctuations, encrypted board communications, derivatives, swaps. Her mind was a high-speed processor, sorting, analyzing, and finding the pattern. "He's not just attacking the stock, Alistair," she said, her voice crisp. The satellite call was secure. "He's attacking your supply chain." Alistair's voice, usually a calm baritone, was frayed. "Elara, he's choking us. He's bought 2 of our key suppliers for microchips. He's bribed the port commissioner in Singapore. My Aquila 7 satellite launched the one that guarantees the next decade of my company. It's grounded. If I can't launch in 72 hours, I forfeit the launch window and the government contract. The stock will collapse. He'll get the company for pennies on the dollar." "Cyrus is a brute, Alistair. He uses a hammer," Elara said, her eyes scanning lines of code. "He thinks you'll panic." "I am panicking, Elara. That's why you're here." "No, you're flustered," she corrected. "Panicking is what he will be doing soon. He's at the Eyrie, correct?" "Yes. Bragging about his victory. He's holding court. He's even poached Damien Hart." Elara's fingers paused on the keyboard. "Who?" "Damien Hart. Your ex-husband. He's a mid-level analyst at BlackRock, but he's been trying to get Thorne's attention for months. Apparently he fed Thorne some low-level intel on one of our subsidiaries. Thorne, as a final insult, hired him last week. He's at the Eyrie as part of Thorne's delegation. A trophy. A way to mock me and... Well, I'm sorry, Elara." Elara was silent. The sheer predictable stupidity of the man. Damien trying to swim with sharks, not realizing he was the chum. He thought he'd arrived. He was just a pawn, a final petty few from Thorne. "It's irrelevant," Elara said, and she meant it. "Damien is a rounding error, a distraction. Forget him. Focus on the problem. You need a launch. Cyrus is blocking the ports." "It's impossible, Elara. We're trapped." "Nothing," Elara said, her eyes narrowing as she found the flaw in Thorne's plan, "is impossible. You just lack the proper leverage. The Aquila 7 is in its hangar in Mojave, correct?" "Yes, but the guidance system, the chips, they're stuck in Singapore." "Forget the chips from Singapore," Elara said. "They're a lost cause. Thorne has them. Let him keep them. We're going to use the Talon system instead." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. "Elara, Talon it's not ready. It's experimental. It's not even ours. It belongs to Räikkönen Dynamics," Elara finished. "And Kimi Räikkönen is at the Eyrie right now trying to get funding for his Mars project. He's allergic to people hate summits and is probably hiding in his room. You're going to go to him. You're not going to offer him money. You're going to offer him a 10% stake in Vail Aerospace and full access to your Aquila launch data for his Mars shot. A 10% stake, that's billions. And losing your company is trillions," Elara snapped. He'll get the Talon guidance system on a plane tonight. I'll handle the logistics of getting it to Mojave and integrated. We'll launch in 48 hours. Cyrus Thorne will wake up, read the news, and find out his entire strategy is worthless. He'll be holding a bag of useless microchips he paid a fortune for. Alistair was quiet. The sound of his breathing was the only thing on the line. God, Ilara, This is why you're you. Can you get here to the area? I need you. I need to show them, all of them, that I'm not finished. Ilara looked out the window. The Maybach was pulling into a private fortified compound. This was her base of operations where she would wage the war. I'll be there, she said. But not yet. I have to secure the asset. You go make the deal with Raikkonen. I'll make the calls to Mojave. When I arrive, Alistair, I want it to be public. I want everyone to see me. Understood? Understood, Alistair said, a new strength in his voice. They won't know what hit them. No, Ilara replied, hanging up the call. They won't. The Erie's Grand Terrace was a miracle of engineering. A massive cantilevered slab of white marble and reinforced glass, it jutted out over a 4,000-foot drop. The air was thin cold and crackled with the energy of unimaginable wealth. Damien Hart felt like he could fly. He held a glass of 30-year-old Macallan, the amber liquid glowing in the afternoon sun. He was in. Not just in, but in the inner circle. He'd been at the Eyrie for 2 days, and it had already changed his life. Cyrus Thorne, his new boss, was holding court by the massive ice sculpture centerpiece. Thorne was a physical man, built like a retired linebacker with a voice that boomed across the terrace. He was laughing, clapping men on the back, the picture of a conquering hero, and Damien was his new lieutenant. "Hart, get over here!" Thorne bellowed, waving him over. Damien practically skipped, his chest puffed out. Sienna, who had of course come with him, was preening by the railing, taking a casual selfie with a Saudi prince in the background. "Yes, Mr. Thorne?" "Tell these old fools what you told me." Thorne laughed, slinging a heavy arm over Damien's shoulders. "About Vale's corporate culture, the dead wood, the rot." Damien, high on the attention, launched into the same speech he'd given Thorne in their first interview. "It's a company built on a fossilized legacy, Mr. Thorne. Stagnant, no innovation. Alistair Vale is a dinosaur coasting on reputation. He's surrounded by yes-men. He lost his edge years ago." "See?" Thorne roared to the group of rival CEOs. "The rot is internal. When I take it over, the first thing I'm doing is firing half the board and liquidating the aerospace division. It's a vanity project, a money pit." A few of the men nodded, eager to agree with the new apex predator. Damien felt a thrill. He was shaping the conversation. Damien Hart was providing the intellectual justification for the biggest takeover of the decade. "And," Damien added, feeling bold, "his weakness has been personal. He's isolated. No family, no real connections. He's a man alone on a collapsing throne." "Well said, Hart. Well said." Thorne drained his glass. "A man alone. I like that." From across the terrace, Alistair Vale watched this display. He sat alone at a small table nursing a coffee. He looked exactly as Damien had described him, a dinosaur, isolated, defeated. The other summit attendees gave him a wide berth, as if his failure was contagious. Vale's phone buzzed. A text from Ilara. Raikkonen agreed. "Talon is airborne. ETA Mojave, 0400. Integration team is standing by. Now I'm handling the second problem." Vale looked up. He caught Thorne's eye. Thorne raised his glass in a mock toast, a cruel, triumphant grin on his face. Vale didn't smile. He simply stood up and walked back inside, a defeated man. Thorne's laughter boomed. He's running back to his room to cry." Damien laughed with him, the loudest of all. He had never felt so powerful. He hated Alara for making him feel small for so long, for her quiet judgment, her lack of belief in him. And now he was here and she were filing books in some dusty, forgotten library. He spotted Sienna. This, he whispered to her, pulling her close, is what winning feels like. This is the big league. Oh, Damien, she breathed. You're amazing. Suddenly, a new sound cut through the laughter and the high-altitude wind. It wasn't the polite whine of the Bell 407s that had been ferrying most of the guests up the mountain. This was a deep, guttural, percussive thud. 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 It was a sound that didn't just break the sound barrier. It bullied it. It was the sound of raw, unadulterated power. The conversations on the terrace faltered. Heads turned, scanning the bright blue sky. "What the hell is that?" Thorne asked, his good humor evaporating. The sound was an intrusion, an unwelcome one. "It's a chopper," someone said, stating the obvious. "I know it's a chopper, you idiot," Thorne snapped. "But what chopper? That's not one of the summits." It crested the peak, a monster against the sun. It was a Sikorsky S-92. Not a civilian spec one. This was matte black with modified lines. It looked less like a corporate transport and more like something that belonged to a Delta Force team. It was the kind of machine that didn't ask for landing clearance. It took it. Damien shielded his eyes, annoyed. Who the hell is arriving now? The summit's been on for 2 days. It's tacky to arrive this late. The Sikorsky didn't aim for the main helipad. It bypassed it, heading for Alistair Vale's private reinforced landing pad, the one attached to his Erie Prime penthouse. The wind from the rotor wash was immense. It blasted the terrace, sending napkins flying and rattling the champagne flutes. "Arrogant," Thorne muttered, brushing his suit. The helicopter settled onto the pad, its engines winding down with a high-pitched scream. Every person on the terrace, the Titans, the Kings, the Predators, was silent, watching. An arrival like this was a statement. Damien squinted, trying to see who was important enough to command such an entrance. It's probably some government official, trying to look important. The side door of the Sikorsky slid open. The first to emerge were not passengers. They were operators. 2 men dressed in unassuming but clearly high-end tactical gear. Charcoal gray Arcteryx shells, no visible weapons, but the air of lethal competence was unmistakable. They stepped onto the pad and scanned the area, their movements fluid and economical. They were not summit security. They were private. Cyrus Thorne went very still. "What is this?" Damien, still oblivious, just scoffed. "Such a production. It's probably just a PR stunt." The 2 operators took positions on either side of the door. Then Alistair Vale, the man who had looked so defeated just moments before, walked out of his penthouse onto the landing pad. He wasn't wearing his funereal suit. He was in a crisp shirt, no tie, and he looked different. Calm. He walked to the helicopter and stood by the door. He wasn't greeting a guest. He was waiting for one. This new detail silenced the terrace completely. Alistair Vale, the trillionaire, was waiting on someone else. Alistair extended his hand into the dark interior of the cabin. A moment later, a hand took his, and she stepped out. The sun hit her, and Damien's world stopped. It was Alara. But it wasn't. It couldn't be. This woman was not ordinary. She was not beige. She was not the simple librarian he'd mocked. This woman was a razor. She wore no makeup, but her skin was flawless. Her hair was pulled back into a severe, elegant knot. She wore a deep gray, perfectly tailored Armani pantsuit that was the color of a storm cloud. She wore flat, practical, but clearly expensive leather shoes. Her only accessory was a watch, a simple steel Patek Philippe, and a pair of dark, impenetrable sunglasses. She didn't look at the crowd. She didn't look at the stunning view. She stepped off the helicopter, released Alistair's hand, and spoke to him. She was too far to hear, but her body language was all business. He nodded deferentially. Alistair Vale, nodded to her. Alara turned to one of her security details, gave a crisp order, and then turned back to Vale. She gestured toward the penthouse. Business. Now. Damien. Sienna's voice was a thin, reedy sound. Damien, who is that? Damien couldn't speak. His throat had closed. The Macallan glass in his hand was so slick with his own sweat that it slipped from his fingers, falling to the marble with a dull, pathetic clack. It didn't break. It just rolled, spilling 30-year-old scotch at his feet. His entire brain was a blue screen of death. Error. Does not compute. Alara. Simple. Ordinary. Librarian. Helicopter. Sikorsky. Vale. Error. That's... A man next to him whispered, a rival CEO. My God, is that Cerebra? Who? Someone else asked. Cerebra, the ghost. I've only heard rumors. She's not a person, she's a concept. They say she structured the EU Project Dawn bailout. They say she's the only person the new Chinese premier will take a call from. I thought she was a myth, a boogeyman for the boardrooms. Cyrus Thorne was no longer smiling. His face had gone a chalky pale white. He knew the name. Everyone at this level knew the name. They thought she was a myth, a legend created by Vale to intimidate his rivals. They were wrong. Alara and Vale turned to walk inside. And for a split second, Alara paused. She turned her head, sunglasses still on, and scanned the terrace. It was not a look. It was a target acquisition sweep. Her head swiveled past Damien. Her eyes, hidden behind the Purcell lenses, didn't stop. They didn't slow. They didn't register his existence. He was nothing. A tree, a rock, a piece of furniture. He was to her just a part of the background. In that single dismissive half-second, Damien Hart experienced a humiliation so profound, so complete, that it hollowed him out. His public mocking of her at the Aspen Gala, his know your limitations speech, his condescending pity, his new life, his new fiancé, his new master of the universe status. It all collapsed into a black hole of his own insignificance. She was not the one who was ordinary. He was. Alara turned away and, with Alistair Vale following a half-step behind her, stepped off the helipad and disappeared into the penthouse. The terrace was silent. The only sound was the high-altitude wind, which suddenly felt very, very cold. All the power, all the money, all the ambition. It had just shifted. It had tilted on its axis, and it was all now pointing to the woman who had just arrived. Sienna was staring at Damien, but not with love. With dawning horror and contempt. You, she whispered, her voice laced with venom. You idiot. You told me she was nobody. Damien opened his mouth. No sound came out. He had mocked her as ordinary, and she had just stepped off a billionaire's helicopter in total deafening silence and erased his entire world. The penthouse was a fortress of glass and steel, silent and insulated from the world. The living room was not a living room. It was a command center. Hollow screens, data streams, and encrypted comms arrays lined the walls. Alara didn't pause. She stripped off her suit jacket, tossing it on a chair. Report. Alistair and his two top aides, who had been waiting in a state of near panic, snapped to attention. Alara, Alistair began. This is Marcos and Chen. They have the latest. Talon is integrated, Marcos, the aerospace chief, said immediately. We're green for launch, but Alistair, there's a problem. Thorne wasn't just blocking the ports. Go on, Alara said, her eyes already scanning a data stream. He has someone on the launch commission, Chen, the legal counsel, said, his voice trembling slightly. He's just filed an emergency injunction, a safety review, citing untested guidance systems. He's using our own safety protocols against us. It'll ground the Aquila for at least a week. The launch window will be gone. Alistair sagged. He's 3 steps ahead. He knew we'd try something. Alara held up a hand. He's not 3 steps ahead. He's 1 step ahead. And he's sloppy. He used a hammer. Again. She walked to the main comms panel. "Who is the commissioner he bought?" "Jared Lynch," Chen said, "head of the Western Range Oversight Committee." Alara's fingers flew across a keyboard. She wasn't hacking. She was just accessing. Jared Lynch. Married. 2 kids. A $1.2 million mortgage on a $400,000 salary. A boat in the marina. A daughter at USC. "He's dirty. We know that," Alistair said, frustrated. "But we can't prove it in time." "We don't need to prove it," Alara said. She stopped typing. A file was on her screen. "Lynch's daughter, her tuition. It's not paid by Lynch. It's paid by a blind trust, the Argosy Fund, established 3 months ago." "Thorne's slush fund," Alistair breathed. "Exactly. Chen, you're a lawyer. You're going to call Lynch, right now. You are going to tell him that you are filing a sealed RICO complaint with the Southern District of New York, naming him and the Argosy Fund as co-conspirators in a stock manipulation scheme. You are going to tell him that you have full auditable proof that the fund paid his daughter's tuition. And you are going to tell him that the only way his daughter doesn't get expelled and he doesn't end up in a federal prison is if his safety review finds no issues in the next 30 minutes. Chen was pale. That's extortion." Alara turned to him, her gray eyes devoid of heat. "This is checkmate. Do it." Chen galvanized, grabbed a secure phone, and ran to the next room. "Marcos," Alara said, turning to the aerospace chief. "Thorne's injunction isn't his only play. He'll have a backup. He'll try to sabotage the launch pad. I want our internal Falcon drone security active. All of it. Set the exclusion zone to 5 miles. I want anything that moves man or animal flagged and tracked. Authorized non-lethal deterrence. Go." Marcos ran to his own station. Alara and Alistair were alone. "You're terrifying Alara," he said, not unkindly. "I'm efficient," she corrected. "Cyrus Thorne thinks this is a game of money. He thinks he can buy his way to a victory. He doesn't understand. This is a game of information. He's loud. He's arrogant. He leaves a trail." She thought for a fleeting second of Damien. Men like that, they are their own worst enemies. Their ego is a liability. You just have to know where to push. "And Damien Hart?" Alistair asked, watching her. "He's part of Thorne's team. He's here." Alara looked at him. "Damien is a symptom. He's a barnacle attached to the whale. He thinks he's moving the ocean, but he's just along for the ride. He's not a player, Alistair. He's a pawn. And pawns," she said, her voice dropping, "are made to be sacrificed." A low-level buzz came from the main console, a proximity alert. "What is it?" Alistair asked. Alara's eyes narrowed. "Someone is on the terrace right outside the penthouse. They bypassed the main security." "Thorne?" "No, not his style. This is sloppy." She hit a button. The soundproof glass became a one-way mirror showing her the view outside, but they remained invisible. It was Damien. He looked broken. His suit was rumpled. His hair was a mess. He was standing at the glass staring at his own pathetic reflection, not knowing she was on the other side watching him. Sienna was gone. He raised a fist and in a pathetic gesture of rage hammered on the glass. It didn't make a sound inside. "Alara!" He screamed, his voice a muffled, distant cry against the triple-paned impact-proof glass. "Alara, I know you're in there. You bitch. You made me look like a fool." He sank to his knees. "How could you? How? What are you? You were my wife. You were ordinary. You were mine." Alistair looked at Alara, his face full of pity and disgust. "Do you want me to have him removed?" Alara watched her ex-husband, the man who had mocked her for his own sport, sobbing on his knees. She felt nothing. Not anger, not pity, not even satisfaction. It was like watching a documentary about a particularly uninteresting species of insect. "No," she said, her voice flat. He's irrelevant. He'll be gone when he gets cold. She turned away from the window back to the data streams. Chen's call should be done. Let's launch a satellite. The news broke at 5:00 a.m. just as the sun was beginning to touch the peaks. It didn't come from a press release. It came as a physical fact. A low, ground-shaking rumble that vibrated through the eyrie, waking every CEO and financier from their sleep. On the massive screens in the summit's central hall, the live feed from SpaceX, who handled the broadcast, switched on. Live Vale, Aerospace, Aquila 7. Successful launch. Mojave Air and Spaceport. The video was undeniable. The massive rocket blazing a trail of fire ascending flawlessly into the dawn sky. The hall was silent. Cyrus Thorne, who had been in a frantic all-night meeting, saw the screen and his blood ran cold. "No," he whispered. "No. Lynch. The injunction." His phone rang. It was his head of legal. "He's dark," the lawyer screamed. "Jared Lynch has gone dark. His phone is off. His house is empty. His family is gone." "What about the launch pad?" Thorne roared. "My team. I sent a team." "Detained," the lawyer said. "Picked up by private security. Trespassing on a federal exclusion zone. Alara. Cerebra. She boxed us in. She knew every move." Thorne threw his phone against the wall. It shattered. The Aquila 7 was in orbit. The government contract was secure. Vale's stock on the pre-market wasn't just recovering, it was exploding. It had jumped 40%. Thorne's hostile takeover hadn't just failed, it had backfired spectacularly. He was now shorting a rocket ship. The margin calls would begin in 1 hour. He wasn't just going to lose money, he was going to be wiped out. He looked across the hall. Alistair Vale was standing there in a fresh suit, drinking a coffee, calmly watching the rocket's telemetry data. He was alone. Alara was nowhere to be seen. Her work was done. But Thorne's humiliation wasn't complete. "Mr. Thorne," he turned. It was Damien Hart running toward him, his face a mask of desperate, frantic energy. "Mr. Thorne, sir, I have information." Damien panted. "Get out of my way, Hart." Thorne started to push past him. "No, wait, it's Alara, my ex-wife. I know her weaknesses." This of all things made Thorne stop. He turned a look of pure toxic curiosity on his face. "Weaknesses? Yes, she's sentimental." Damien lied, grasping at straws. She has a soft spot for art, for antiquities. She's not just a numbers person. And how?" Thorne said, his voice dangerously soft. "Would you know that Hart? The man who thought she was a librarian." Damien's face fell. You," Thorne said, stepping so close Damien could smell the rage and scotch on his breath, "are the reason for this. You were the final insult. You were the signal. You were the pawn. No, I'm your lieutenant." "You're fired," Thorne spat. "You're a fool. You're an embarrassment. You didn't just sleep next to the most powerful woman in the world, you divorced her because she was too ordinary for you." Thorne laughed. It was a terrible, broken sound. "You're the punchline, Hart. The entire summit is laughing at you." He shoved Damien so hard that he stumbled backward, falling over a lounge chair. Thorne stormed out of the hall, his empire collapsing around him. Damien sat on the floor in his rumpled $1,000,000 suit as the titans of industry walked past him. No one offered a hand. No one even looked at him. Sienna was already gone. He'd seen her at 3:00 a.m. in the lobby getting into the elevator with the Saudi prince. He was ruined. Not financially. Not yet. But in a way that was so much worse. He was a joke. He had flown to the sun. He had bragged and postured and mocked. And the wife he'd thrown away, the ordinary wife, had been the sun all along. And she had burned him to ashes without even noticing he was there. His phone buzzed. A notification from his bank. His joint account with Sienna had just been emptied. He just sat there as the world moved on without him, the image of the Aquila 7 burning on the screen above. The private airfield 100 miles south of the Eyrie was a study in desolation. It was not a place for arrivals. It was a place for disappearances. A single wind-swept tarmac cut a black line through a sea of white. Snow had begun to fall, not in gentle-looking flakes, but in hard, stinging pellets, driven by a wind that moaned across the empty landscape. The cold was absolute. It was a cold that felt personal, a living thing that sought to find and freeze the marrow in one's bones. Elara's Pilatus PC-12 sat waiting, a sleek gray shape against the churning gray sky. Its engines were in a low-level idle, the propellers turning in a slow hypnotic arc, ready to bite the air. She had been on the ground for exactly 20 minutes. In that time, she had debriefed with her ground team, confirmed the Aquila 7's telemetry was stable, and was already running diagnostics on her next project, a deep data analysis of water rights negotiations in the Zambezi River Basin, the Eyrie Allister Vale. Cyrus Thorne, that file was already closed in her mind, marked success and archived. She wore a long, dark wool coat over her suit. Her duffel bag containing a change of clothes, a secure laptop, and 3 encrypted hard drives was slung over her shoulder. She was walking toward the plane, her boots crunching on the thin layer of ice, when the sound came. It was not the wind, and it was not the engines. It was a shout. Elara. It was a raw animal sound ripped from a throat. A sound of pure, unadulterated panic. She paused her back to the noise. She did not sigh. She did not flinch. She simply stopped calculating. The sound was not a threat. It was an annoyance. A loose thread she thought had already been snipped. She heard him running, the frantic, uneven thud-slap-thud of a man in expensive, thin-soled dress shoes slipping and sliding on the icy tarmac. Elara, please wait. Slowly she turned. He looked like a survivor of some terrible wreck. He was coatless. His Tom Ford tuxedo, the one he had worn with such peacock-like pride, was now a ruined, rumpled mess, stained with what looked like motor oil from whatever desperate charter helicopter he had taken. He must have burned the last of his credit or promised some astronomical fee to get here. His hair was matted with sweat and melting snow. His face was a mask of raw, red-chapped skin, his eyes wide and bloodshot, tracks of dried tears visible on his cheeks. He stumbled, caught himself, and finally skidded to a stop 10 feet from her, breathing in great, ragged, sobbing gasps that turned to steam in the frozen air. Elara, he panted, holding a hand up as if to stop her from vanishing. I'm sorry. She said nothing. She just watched him. Her face was impassive, shielded from the wind by the collar of her coat. She was a statue of judgment, and he was the penitent, breaking himself against her. I didn't know. He pleaded, the words tumbling out. You have to believe me. How could I possibly know you? You lied to me. For years. He was starting to get angry, the pity shifting to blame as it always did with him. You were a librarian. Who are you? That, Elara said, her voice quiet, but it cut through the wind like a razor, is the only question you've ever asked me that actually matters. And you've had a decade to find the answer. But our life, he cried, his voice cracking. Our marriage? Was it all a joke to you? All those years? The house, the dinners, us? Were you laughing at me? Elara allowed a small, cold, clinical thought to surface. She analyzed him. The self-pity, the victimhood, the utter inability to comprehend a universe that did not revolve around him. Laugh at you, Damien, she said, taking one step closer. The wind whipped a strand of her hair from its knot, and she ignored it. No, I was never laughing. Laughter implies amusement. You were a condition. You were camouflage. I was a fugitive in a sense, hiding from a life that had nearly killed me. And you were the most ordinary, incurious, self-absorbed man I could find. You were the perfect hiding place. Incurious, he repeated, shaking his head, uncomprehending. I asked about your day every day. You asked, she corrected, but you never listened. You asked, how was your day, as a prelude to telling me about your day. You were so busy building your own narrative, trying to impress a world you thought was watching, that you never once looked at the person living in your own house. You saw a quiet, simple woman because that's what you needed to see. You needed a beige background to make your own colors look brighter. You didn't want me to be anything more. She let that hang in the air. He was shaking, but not just from the cold. So what? He stammered. I was just a cover. A pawn? He had used the same word Thorne had. She saw the bitter irony. You weren't a pawn in my game, Damien, she said. You weren't in my game at all. You were on a different board entirely. One you built for yourself. I was simply biding my time. Waiting. You call our life a lie. I call it a cocoon. I was waiting to be finished with it. You just mistook the cocoon for the butterfly. But... He was desperate now, the reality of his own insignificance crashing down on him. I can change, Alara. I see you now. I get it. I can be useful to you. He took a step forward, his hands out. I'm good with people I'm good at strategy. You need a public face. Someone to manage things. I can do that. I can be whatever you want. I can be your anything. Just don't leave me like this. Please. Of all the things he had said, that was the most revealing, the most pathetic. Ilara's gaze, if possible, grew colder. What you're feeling right now, Damien, isn't love. It isn't even regret for what you lost. It's envy. You're grieving the status you think I could give you. You just swapped one trophy Sienna for a new one you think is more powerful. You haven't changed. You've just recalculated. You're still the same man, just with a new price tag. No, he screamed, the wind tearing the word from his mouth. No, you're wrong. I'm ruined. Don't you understand? You did this to me. You and Vale. You made me a joke. She took her final step, stopping directly in front of him. He was taller, but in that moment he had never looked so small. I did nothing, she whispered, her voice a thread of steel. I simply arrived. I existed. Your own ego, your own arrogance, your own need to put me down to build yourself up. That is what ruined you. You stood at that gala and you mocked me. You told me to know my limitations because you couldn't bear the thought that I might not have any. You built your house on a foundation of sand, Damien, she continued, and you are blaming the tide for coming in. You are not a joke because of me. You are a joke because you are one. He had no answer. He just stared, his mouth open, as the truth of her words, the final, brutal clinical assessment, hit him. She held his gaze for 1 second longer. Then she turned her back to him and walked the remaining steps to her plane. Ilara, no, no, he yelled, a sound of pure childlike despair. Don't go. You can't just leave me here. She didn't pause. She mounted the steps, her movements fluid and unhurried. She reached the top, gave a single nod to the pilot visible in the cockpit, and stepped inside. The heavy door began to hiss closed. Damien, in a last, desperate surge, ran forward, his hands outstretched. Ilara! The door sealed with a solid, final thunk. It was a sound of absolute finality, the sound of a vault locking. Damien hammered on the metal, his gloveless fists striking the cold fuselage. No, let me in! Ilara, come back! He might as well have been punching a mountain. The engines, which had been at a low idle, suddenly whined the pitch, screaming higher. The propellers became a blur, then a transparent-looking disk. A blast of prop wash, a hurricane of ice pellets and snow erupted from the engines, hitting Damien with the force of a physical blow. He was thrown backward, stumbling, shielding his face as the icy shrapnel cut at his exposed skin. He fell, landing hard on his back on the frozen tarmac. Through the stinging blizzard he watched, prone and pathetic, as the Pilatus taxi turned its nose to the runway and without a moment's hesitation raced into the wind. It lifted off with a power and grace that seemed impossible, climbing at a steep, aggressive angle, disappearing into the heavy gray clouds in seconds. And then, silence. The engine's roar faded, replaced instantly by the high, thin, lonely moan of the wind. Damien Hart lay on the tarmac, the snow beginning to fall on him again, settling on his ruined suit and his unseeing eyes. He was left alone in the cold, with nothing but the crushing, absolute, and inescapable weight of his own ordinariness. In the end, this was never a story about revenge. Revenge would have required Alara to care. This was a story about consequence. Damien Hart built his entire world on the idea of image, on looking down on others to feel tall. He thought the ultimate flex was his new fiancée, his new boss, and his new life. But he forgot the most important rule: the quietest person in the room is often the most powerful. He mocked her as ordinary, without ever realizing that he was the only one who couldn't see the truth. She didn't need to defeat him. She just needed to be herself. And in the end, her silence was louder and more devastating than any of his boasts. What did you think of Alara's story? Let me know in the comments what you think Damien will do next. And if you enjoyed this, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who appreciates a story of quiet power, and subscribe for more stories where the ordinary turn out to be anything but.